Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this, I think, really exciting and really important webinar on confronting gender bias in the workplace in 2022. I hope you can hear me. Can you just let me know? We have had a couple of technical issues in the past, so someone just pop in the chat. Yes, you can hear us all and see us. That would be great. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking. But I'll introduce the topic and myself first. So obviously, I think I would hope if we're attending this, we are aware of the fact that as much as we might want to live in a gender equal world, we don't yet. And although it might be less overt than when women were treated as property or excluded from the right to vote, there is still gender bias in this country and all over the world. But a lot of that has become more subtle, maybe harder to sometimes pick out. And bias in general, I think, is something that has become quite difficult to navigate, particularly if you are from a group where your voices have been marginalised. So we're talking about this today to try and draw attention to it, to try and shout louder for a more equal world, and to bring together all of our experiences about what it's like and why we care so much about creating true gender equality. We're focused on gender today specifically, but of course there are so many other different aspects, and we'll be getting into that as well, about an unequal world. It's not just gender that we should be fighting for in terms of equality. So I'm Molly. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Flexa. Flexa is a startup that is focused on helping people to find companies that offer genuine flexible working. Obviously, flexibility increases inclusivity. So for us, we have about 67% women registered on our platform, and we have a much more diverse candidate base in terms of disabilities, in terms of race, and in terms of sexual orientation on Flexa as well. So for companies, it's about showcasing the fact that you're a genuinely inclusive place to work. And for candidates, it's about being able to find a place of work that will fit and be right for you and allow you to thrive rather than being stuck into a certain way of working. And the idea for it, and I'll kind of talk about my personal story quickly, was when I was working in investment banking. And people have heard this before. I always talk about it because I think it's important to talk about it if it's interesting. When I was working in investment banking, so I have an autoimmune disease. That means that sometimes I can't walk, and I'm technically classified as disabled. And I couldn't walk about once a week back then. Thankfully, it's only a few times a year now. So I asked to work from home once a week, and they put a settlement package in front of me, sacked me, and told me to leave immediately. I was one of two women in that 100-person equity research company, and they sacked the other woman while she was on maternity leave. So that wasn't exactly the most gender equal or gender supportive company in the world. So I am incredibly passionate about it, and I shout about it a lot on LinkedIn, the need for more equality and for us to be all treated as equals. But that is enough about me and enough about Flexa. I would love to introduce, or leave our panelists introduce themselves. So Asha, would you like to start?
Thank you so much, Molly. And I love that story. I don't get tired of hearing it. Thank you for sharing it with us. I'm Asha. I'm Chief People Officer at By Miles. We're an insurtech, and we're focused on making driving fairer. But really, fundamentally, at the heart of what we do is trying to make the world fairer through lots of other things that we're doing. And I use the platform and privilege that I have to educate, to talk about experiences that I have. I'm autistic, I'm genderqueer, I'm brown, I'm female presenting, and there's lots of different experiences that come with living in that body in this world. So, it's I think there's a lot here that I'm very passionate about, but also as a Chief People Officer, trying to really create a different type of environment for our employees, something that is fundamentally different to kind of the biases that we're seeing everywhere, all over the world.
Thank you very much. And Trin, I will hand over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Trin. I'm the founding partner of C Ventures. So our goal is to drive more capital to female-led businesses and back more diverse founding teams. We're now raising our first fund, but we're also running a yearly Catalyst program to support women on fundraising. My background is actually very different. I've never actually worked in a corporate environment. I've been in investments now in early stage in VC funds for the last 5-6 years. Before that, I was a founder in a fintech and worktech space. So I can definitely share my experiences from a founder perspective. And also I've been sitting on numerous investment committees and seeing how female founders do not get the funding, but male founders do. And it's been extremely frustrating for me. And that's really one of the reasons I also started C Ventures, because I think, you can't expect others to make the change if you don't make the change. So I felt really passionate about that and making that change happen. So that's why I quit my job and started working on that.
Awesome. David.
Yeah, it's how to compete. How do you present oneself after those things? High-level chief commercial officer of a startup called WeFarm, focused on small-scale farmers around the world. There's about 500 million of them, and they produce 70% of the food in the world. But nobody's trying to help them to manage their farm better and create more convenience. And we're doing that by creating an online community, helping them buy and sell better through the platform. But I also have another hat on as the co-founder of Alma Angel, which is a diverse community of angels focused on backing ambitious female founders. Before actually moving into startup, I spent 10 years as a venture investor across Europe. And before that, 10 years as an operator in Israel building the tech products. I think one of the fundamental things, and Molly called me as the token guy in the room, is that my fundamental belief in my own journey about understanding my privilege and the changes that after I started living in Israel and moved from a majority focused country where I was white, male, and Jewish, which is basically the only place is Israel that you can adhere to all things, and became a minority, helped me understand better the journey that I want to see in tech. And I realized that there's a platform where I can actually talk about it, need to not just talk, but actually action. And we can talk a bit about that later on.
Great, fantastic introductions. Thank you very much, everybody. Just a quick note to everybody. Hopefully we'll cover lots of different topics and themes over the next sort of half an hour of discussion. But if you have any specific questions that you'd like to ask or points that you'd like to make, at the bottom there where it says ask a question, just pop that in. And then in the kind of second half of the webinar, we'll come to answering all of those questions. So feel free to put them in at any time or make comments in the sort of chat bit on the side. So let's kick off. I like starting with sort of personal stories because I feel like it helps everybody to sort of get to know our panelists and to understand exactly kind of where we're coming from. We're talking, although I do resent sometimes the pressure that gets put on people in particular to give case studies of discrimination and to make it digestible for people. I've often found, especially when I've talked about the discrimination that I've experienced as a female founder, and Trin, I think you might relate to this, where you say, oh, it's much harder to raise capital as a woman, and you talk about your experiences, and people go, oh, that doesn't sound that bad. Can you give me another example? And you sound like a woman scorned because you can't put it into the right shocking enough words for people to be able to digest. So I think that that's always something to be very aware of when you ask people to talk about their own experiences. But I'm still keen to have a chat about how we see gender bias in the world, and our own experiences of it and how we've come to want to talk about it. So Trin, I'd love to start with you from both from a female founder perspective, but also from your fund perspective as well.
Sure. I think, you know well enough how hard it is as a female founder to go and raise money. Try to do that as a female fund manager. It's even 10 times harder. So back in the days when I was a co-founder, then I actually had minority shares in the companies. I wasn't even responsible for fundraising, to be fair. Back in 2009, when I joined the first company as a founding team employee. And I'm kicking myself that I didn't ask more shares. And what I'm now telling a lot of women is ask more shares, ask equity. Don't just take the money, because I feel like this is what a lot of male co-founders tend to offer female co-founders is very little equity and more just cash. But it is a long shot. It's a long-term journey you're going into. You have to think about it as long-term, and I think that is maybe something I'm a little bit disappointed about my former partners or my former co-founders is that I was never as involved in decision making as I would have liked to be, because I was eventually on an equal level of starting the business, right? And it's one of the biggest learning curves as a founder. In terms of fundraising, I wasn't as involved in fundraising process, yet I'm fundraising now as a female fund manager. And honestly, I don't know if it's because I'm a woman or I'm raising capital to back women, or it's just in general fundraising is always hard, and I didn't expect it to be easy. But I think oftentimes I just get a lot of questions about our fund thesis of why would you build a thesis around backing women? Like, is that even a thesis? Why would you exclude that massive market opportunity out there, male founded teams and businesses that men have founded? Yet I strongly believe that female founded teams have been overlooked years, and that's what we're trying to change, because we massively believe that women are the ones who are actually building businesses in innovative sectors and untapped markets that we can now focus on. So we're really here to change that. But also throughout my experience in former funds, I've obviously been on multiple deal flow calls with my male colleagues, sitting on investment committees with corporates, with my male partners, managing partners. And what I see that in venture capital is obviously massively biased towards men. And I see men get asked very promotional questions, whilst women still get asked very preventative questions. And that really changed the end result, because women therefore become much more defensive in their answers, the way they answer the questions. Whilst men can just go and sell. And, if you ask about your sales process, for example, then women maybe are asked like, how long will it take you to break even? Whilst men will be asked, more like, how your cash flows, or how do you monetize this business in the future or something. So you focus more on the advancement and achievements and more the successful outcome, rather than the how do you break even. So I think these things are very noticeable, and there's so much bias, and we know that now in venture capital there is this bias. I think it's more about how do we overcome this now. How do we move forward and remove that and take the steps and changes to make things better?
100%. And it's obviously funds like yours that are helping to advance that. I always find it really funny when people say, oh, but why just invest in women? Then you're cutting off, all the male investments that you could make. But it's just the same as having an investment thesis around, I just invest in direct-to-consumer goods, or I just invest in deep tech, or I just invest in AI. Like, it's a thesis in itself, and yet so many people can't see that there is a massive opportunity there by focusing on underrepresented founders that are creating great businesses, but they don't see it as a logical thesis. They see it as sometimes tokenism, sometimes completely perplexing to them.
But I think we also need to move away from, we invest in women because we need gender balance. We also invest in women because we think women bring awesome returns. We invest in diverse teams because it's proven that diverse teams, they bring 2.5x better returns than white male founded teams. And the opportunities that women can bring, they actually build businesses to the 50% of the population that has been overlooked to date. Caregiving, menopause, fertility, countless amounts of new sectors that have been innovated. So that's my take on it.
That's great. Asha, I'd love to hand over to you and kind of your experiences as well.
Yeah, it's always interesting when I'm asked to talk about my experiences, because there's something, I'm so happy to be here and I'm so glad I'm being asked to talk about it. But I think there's something interesting about the way that we still set up that, like, come talk about your experience. It's like it's like trauma porn, right? Like I'm gonna lay all my trauma out on the table so that you who are not traumatized can learn that you need to be better, you know? So I think there's something interesting about the fact we're still in that setup where we're still trying to prove that it's true, right? And so I think that's interesting. And so yeah, I mean, I am female presenting and have been since I was born. So, you know, I was called a girl and kind of just accepted that because there wasn't an alternative presented or mirrored to me. So spent a long time just experiencing multiple kind of layers of genderism and sexism because I was experiencing sexism as a woman, but also experiencing not being seen because I wasn't a woman, but that wasn't being reflected anywhere. So I couldn't make sense of it. So there was a lot of dual things there. But, you know, in my first couple of jobs, people, and particularly because when you're junior as well, people will say more things to you than they will. So people don't say as many things to me now when they know my position. But when I was kind of junior and younger, you know, I had a sales director say to me, you know, you must have been really good in interview over your white counterparts to get this job. You know, we'd be asked to make the tea and get the biscuits and all that crap. You know, I worked in recruitment as well. Recruitment is, you know, if you've ever seen The Wolf of Wall Street, it's really not that different, to be honest with you. Yeah, and I actually was sexually assaulted in my second job. At a Christmas party, like it was like, it wasn't this kind of dark street somewhere. It was in a Christmas party, and it's, you know, these things happen, and then they're called one-offs, and it's like, you know, this guy was a misogynist, just going around being a misogynist, and that didn't change. I punched him, by the way. Well done. And it's wonderful that I was able to do that, but like, you know, so many people, that is not how that story ends. But you know, that was one of my very first introductions to the corporate world, was like, okay, this is what it is. This is what I'm signing up for. You know, so, and then it got more covert as I got more senior and I got more authority. It was less, you know, sexual assault in the toilets, and it was more the covert sexism and things like, you know, I was running a global team and a VP would say to me when I looked good and when I would like wear a little dress or something, you look smart today. You look so smart today. And it was so icky and so gross. And everyone knew what he meant. And he would ask me to go and print things for him. Go and print things for we didn't even work, you know, like, I'm running a global team. I should just go print that for me. Like, why? You know, so there's loads of things, but like it gets the more insidious it is, the more you start to question, is this real? Am I actually experiencing this, or am I imagining it? And that's where it's really dangerous as well. So it's quite difficult to wake up and see actually what's going on, and recognize it, because we're all in the system as well. And I think this is this thing, and I'll talk about it more when we talk about how to change things. But Frida D, who's an amazing feminist author, said, you know, nobody is born, you don't become a feminist, you're born a feminist, because no one is born thinking women deserve less rights than men. You either stay a feminist or you become a misogynist. And I think it's this understanding that we're not actually just set up to be this way. This bias doesn't naturally exist in our babies. Like, we teach them that. And I think we have to start there. We have to recognize we're teaching children this. And that's the root of, you know, get to grips with.
What great timing. Another dog just walked into our office and he's lost it. Some really amazing points there. And I think it was really interesting how you talked about the idea of the kind of expected behaviors and how you, when you were born a woman and told you are a woman, you were expected to behave in certain ways. And I think that's very interesting, because obviously for you, there was no other choice at that time. But I think often for women who still identify as women as well, there's such a breadth of our characteristics and how we behave and how we dress and how we are as well. You know, it's ultimately all a kind of spectrum. But we're expected to be smiley and calm and warm and behave in a certain way. And when we don't do that, we're judged so harshly for not conforming to those very female stereotypes. And I find that happens really often in my role as a founder. And when you talk to investors, if you push back on things, if you say no, you're seen as tough and aggressive and harsh, and can I handle her, or is she too difficult? Whereas if that's a man, they don't get asked those questions.
Yeah, I've been called bossy. I've been called scary. I've been called scary by other women I work with because they've internalized all of their sexism. So they're like, "Oh, you're so scary," and it's like, "No, I'm not. You just wish you could be like this and you could get out of your stuff." And it's that, it's this unlearning of these things that we've been taught. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And as you say, we're all part of the system, so sometimes it's difficult to
take
your head out and see it.
The chimp doesn't know it's in a cage.
David, I'd love to hear kind of your experiences, and obviously talked about this before with you as a father wanting to create a better world for your son, and I wrongly assumed daughter, so that is my own internal gender bias there. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
So it's kind of, I'm humbled by the experiences of yourself, Trin, and Asha. There is bias towards men, but let's be honest, it's a privilege bias. So it's not that. I think it's more about us that do want to change. And the main example is about parenthood, both from an organization perspective, but even the system itself. And I know it's first world problems from a male perspective, but I want to be an involved father. The entire system assumes that my wife is the decision maker, and basically I need to fight to join a WhatsApp group with parents because it's only moms. I actually don't feel comfortable commenting there because I'm probably there's two fathers on the group. Every time they organize something from the school, if my wife is not available, nothing happens because they don't accept me as person, so they don't reach out, although they have all the details. Again, this is a small problem compared to everything that we talked about, but that goes into how organizations think. Because one of the fundamental aspects is the woman is always the caregiver, hence it's okay if she takes time off, but not if the man. If we're talking about the systemic aspect of it and we want to allow women to rise, we need to allow men to balance their life as well and have that as an acceptable thing, that a man will leave early to pick up the kids and not just celebrate the fact that once a week you do that. And I think there's a fundamental aspect that we as society, goes back to what Asha mentioned, is that it's ingrained in how we look from a culture perspective that men are helpers versus partners. And if you're perceived as a helper, the responsibility is not on you. She will tell me what to do, but that's not how we need to manage. And if we're talking about equal partners, the responsibility lies within both of us. And we need to balance both society and the culture in the workplace, but also across the entire system of the culture we're facing. The second layer, which is mostly my experience with supporting and working with female founders, I think Trin has been very generous in how she described it, because I started working specifically with female founders about 5 years ago. And I think one of the challenges, I think Asha mentioned it, the reasons we need to talk about this is that no matter how we're going to position it, 80% of tech and venture capital world is men. At least today. It's still 20% non-men, but most of them white men. And the challenge is, and I think I posted as part of what happens when you posted on Facebook about this session, one of the biggest challenges is most men don't actually experience these problems. So it goes back to they're not even aware it's a problem because they don't experience it. We need to go above and beyond the stage where if you're not aware, that doesn't mean it's not a problem. And I think one of the things I realized, and again, part of my own privilege, is when I started working with female founders, I got to experience the whole challenge of raising wild women, which basically I introduced female founders that I believed in and supported into different investors. And suddenly you hear weird stories like, we stepped into the room and he basically for half an hour talked to my PA, which is a guy. I'm the CEO, I'm the founder. The investor only talked to the PA. Or the moment he realized there's a woman, he said, okay, let me call my wife. I was like, what does your wife know about deep tech investment? Nothing. But there's a lot of biases, and I think there's a lot of aspects where men, especially from an investor perspective, look at female founders with a different lens, not just the questions they ask, but they don't see it as a potential business opportunity. I think the ability to talk about it and to raise that and to make sure that we're aware of the biases we bring in is something that we just need to expose and change the dynamic of that discussion.
I completely agree. I remember, Asha, I think it was you that said, it was on LinkedIn, you said, if you're shocked, then you're not informed. And I thought that was a really nice way of summarizing. People are like, God, that's so shocking. It's like, but it happens all the time.
This is it. If you're shocked, it's not happening to you, and it's affecting you. And I think Sarah's just written a comment, and I feel that so much, Sarah. I feel that frustration that like, oh, this is all great, but like, what are we doing about it? And even the way that this has been framed, and I understand totally why it's been framed this way, because there's still a fear about alienating people by actually calling things what they are. And I'm not talking about bias anymore, because bias is like, you've got it, I've got it, we've all got it, we've just got it. No, we are being socialized in a sexist, genderist, racist, homophobic structure and system, and we have been. And the only reason we don't know that is because we haven't been educated about it, because we've been educated by colonialists who don't want us to be educated about that. You have to go find that information. It's all there. There are so many amazing Black creators writing about colonialism, and it's brilliant. And, we have to talk about intersectionality. Progress is intersectional. We can't just talk about women, because if we just talk about women and we don't talk about racism, we're only talking about white women. And that's so important. And if we don't talk about ableism, we're not talking about disabled people. These things are intersectional, and we have to come together and recognize that. And progress comes from educating ourselves and getting other people to do their own work and go, if you're shocked, it's because you don't know enough. Go educate yourself. And companies need to do anti-racism training and anti-sexism training. And it can't be bias training or whatever. It's too soft. Like that's, that's shoveling snow in an avalanche, right? We have to get serious about this and go, this is a system that's enormous. If we have any chance, we've got to get serious about education.
Yeah, I completely agree. And to Sarah's point, like, absolutely, it does feel like we're having kind of rehashing this over and over again. But I think from my perspective, without talking about it and without shouting about it, there are still so many people who are naive of this. But that doesn't mean that we can't solve problems that exist. So obviously you talked about being real about it and not talking about necessarily bias, because it is too soft. It's not shocking enough for people that will be shocked. I think another one David really touched on well there is the idea of companies can create environments that are more inclusive and do actually genuinely support equality. And from our perspective, like when we see companies that come to us and they're genuinely flexible, very often they have much better diversity. And the reason for that is because if you start off with an actually flexible company that supports people to work in a way that is right for them and gives them choice and freedom in that, it means that they don't have to justify why they need to work like that. So it's not expecting somebody to say, hey, I'm a mum and I need to work, flexible hours, or I have a disability, so I need to work from home sometimes. Making people justify their reasons for something holds us back from actually attaining that equality. Whereas if you give everybody access to flexibility, men will feel more likely to take it. People that don't have a reason for it, they just don't like mornings and they want to work later into the evening, will feel that they can take it too. And that brings everybody onto a level playing field rather than expecting those to justify their reasons for it. So I think flexible working, shouting and training and educating people about the shocking nature of it. And Trin, I would love to hear your thoughts on, obviously, your work funding women. Like, what have been the things that have made a difference to getting more women more money? Like, what has made the impact?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also like Sarah's comment about, there's been a lot of talk and we keep on talking, and I feel the same. And I felt the same when I started C, and I still feel the same. And I keep on seeing the same numbers coming out, still 1.7% of venture capital going to female founders. And it makes it makes me heavy in my heart when I just keep on listening and keep on hearing that. Whilst I feel we need to do more and we need to execute more. We need to take more action. And it is a systematic change. It is big systematic change that needs to happen. And it's very hard to achieve that overnight. But I think everyone who can do small things to drive towards there, be it then change within corporate environments, work environments, exactly as you do with Flexa, or as Asha explained, what they're working on. Or from venture capital perspective, from governments, try to, for example, have more funding going to the funders who fund diverse founding teams, underrepresented founders, have more funding, have more. Do we need quotas? To be honest, where we are today, I think we need quotas. I know a lot of people disagree with me, but we need quotas almost in the funds, because I don't see this movement happening fast enough, or this change happening fast enough if we don't have that. So I don't want there to be only female founder funds or Black founder funds. I want there to be all these funds that back diverse founding teams who exist today, but we can't have this change happen overnight. So what we've done, and to be honest, I wish there were more people like me who just quit their job during pandemic, say, look, I just want to make this change. And it was hard. I mean, last year, I built C with my co-founder and partner from our own pockets. We didn't raise money to do that. We took 25 founders through our programs, and we helped them day and night, connecting them with investors, giving them all our experience, bringing in more people to get them access to more investors to share their learnings, their experiences of how to get venture capital. And really the real key there is to open the networks to them and bringing the money to them. And what we can do is help them to navigate through this crazy world of venture capital, making it more transparent, explaining them how to get more momentum, how to pitch like a bro. If you need to pitch like a bro, I wish they wouldn't. I wish they pitched as their business, as themselves. And I feel like some of the businesses have the greatest stories when they pitch as them, as people. But some people just need some push, need some navigation. They need some guidance, and it helps. I wish I had a mentor when I was 21 who helped me to guide this whole journey as a founder, as a first employee of a startup, as investor in the first investment firm. I wish I had that person or two of these people to guide that through. So what we are doing really is, as soon as the systematic change will one day happen, we are trying to help the founders, to give them all the tools, the strategies, access to the network, and to support them with all our forces to drive more capital towards them. And, it's worked so far. Within 1 year, they raised 23 million in capital. Maybe it was not all ours, but they did a lot of work themselves on that. They had their own networks. But we really hope that it helped, that they were part of this journey with us at C Ventures. And now, obviously, we are raising capital because we want to put capital behind the program. We want to put capital behind every founder that we bring in. So that is already a lot of work we're doing on our end. But I'd like to see really governments doing more, funds doing more, workplaces doing more. I'm working a lot with corporates myself, and sometimes I see people within corporates who are really pushing the change. They are trying to do everything they can to get us to the next person that we can speak to. And I have so much admiration for these women who are like pushing us internally. And sometimes I think if we had more of these women on the top level, we could really make the change happen. And the same, with LPs, we just need more education there. But also, I love events, I love awards, I love reports, but there's a lot of money going there. Can we just take this money and do something more impactful with that, and actually put it in the hands of female founders, underrepresented founders, Black founders, any founders who don't have the networks and the access?
Completely agree with that. I think that's really useful, actionable points. And I wish that we didn't have to have quotas, but I do agree with you that in terms of actually creating a proper change and moving as quickly as we need to, they do have to exist. Like we see from pretty much anything, if there's a very, very slow trickle, there's nearly always like a reversion back to the mean. And then again, it's like you make 3 steps forward and then 2.5 steps backwards. There's a reversion to the mean consistently. And like to draw a parallel with what the pandemic did for our working environments, it took an entire global pandemic for us to actually make progress with flexible working and choice. And it feels like we need a big push on quotas and a huge amount of attention to go on to underrepresented founders in order to create that wave that actually kind of drives us forward and actually gets us somewhere. And we can't do that without quotas at this point. Like there's not going to be this mindset shift overnight, sadly. I wish there was.
Absolutely.
David, I'd love to hear your opinions on what you think companies and individuals can do to actually make a difference. You know, to Sarah's point, like how can we change? Like what can we do to create action?
So I think there's one thing, and this is also from an ex-VC perspective, that, and I understand it's tiring. And again, I do come from a privileged position, but I think to change a system, it takes time. And I think we also need to recognize that, yes, we're definitely not where we need to be in terms of equality, but just in the 5 years alone, there's been a lot of progress. That doesn't mean it shouldn't continue and it should escalate. But I think sometimes because the battle is daily, we basically just get exhausted. If I get exhausted, it's like, Molly, I replied to your post just when I saw how people interacted with that. It's like, as a middle-aged white guy, to see that is exhausting. And not to mention if you are a woman or like a queer or black and see those interactions. So I definitely get that. And I totally sympathize with what Sarah said. I think, though, if you look at the system, it changes. We just need to keep pushing it till it gets to a tipping point. Is the tipping point 30%, 40%, and then it becomes more? I don't know, but I can tell you that even in Alma Angels, we have 30% men, 70% women as angel investors, but 30% men. So it's about doing it together and not, and this is our obligation as people, as men that want that equality, is to put our money and our time and effort and resources into where it is. In terms of actionable stuff, I think, and this is, I would say there's two major things that, at least from my experience with my own personal experience, that actually make a needle, which is making sure, and I know talk is cheap, but a lot of people within the organizations are not aware. Men, women, basically just black, different experience and different underrepresented people within organizations just feel comfortable with the situation or just absorb it. So keep talking about it, keep it raising it is step number one that actually starts doing it. The second is data. Start collecting data and surface it and create transparency of that data. If we're talking about hiring, like what's the flow of hiring, how many diverse individuals are going into each process. Start exposing the data of diversity that you have in the organization and insist that that is transparent. Those two things together alone will start like recognizing the challenge that the organization have. For example, if for every interview you have 50-50 in terms of gender diversity at the top, but at the interview position, you get all males, all white male, no black, no brown, no experience. So that is step number one from an organization. I think Flexa is a good way to start doing that. Like, I'm happy that WeFarm is rated 95% within Flexa, but that entire aspect is about creating, and we all suffer from the existence of, and sometimes fatigue, because we talk about it and we engage with it. For the majority of people, it's another event or another post on LinkedIn. So it's about all of us coming together and supporting each other to continue the struggle. On an individual basis, I think it's actually speaking up when you see that and taking the time to explain why is wrong, other than just, I think there's an aspect of being pissed off when that happens. And I'm like, I'm an Israeli male. The amount of aggressiveness I have on average compared to the British person is very high. But I think the challenge is understanding that sometimes when I go too deep, too fast, people disconnect. So it's about how do I balance, but still speak up, make sure people, that is not okay, the way you behave, that is not okay. We don't accept that as a company. I don't accept that as an individual. And the challenge is, till it becomes a systemic change, we as individuals need to put the time and effort. It's a lot about us, about making sure that our allies within the organizations are able to combine together and drive that. So that's a lot, and definitely not all the answers there. But I'm actually super intrigued by what Asha has to say, because I saw some of her comments. There's like downward patriarchy was just an easy one of them.
Yeah. So I hear you. Look, it takes time. I'm calling BS. It doesn't take time. It takes work, and people don't want to do the work. It doesn't take time. It takes making decisions that people don't want to make. And this is, for me, is like, the majority of people are bored with these posts. No, the majority of people who aren't affected by these posts are bored with these posts. I am not bored of these posts. I live for these posts. So if you're bored and you're tired, it's because it doesn't affect you. And if you're bored and you're tired, you're nowhere near as tired as the people fighting the fight. So for me, there's this like, there's been enough time. So we need to get serious. So what we're doing at By Miles, because this is where I have some influence and some power, and where I'm trying to do something different. Myself and our C-suite are all committed to our own individual anti-racism, anti-sexism, anti-queerphobia journeys. We are actively educating ourselves, and just being queer and being brown doesn't mean I'm free of queerphobia and being a woman doesn't make you free of sexism, because we're all raised in this society. We have it, we just internalize it. We have to confront our own stuff and go, what do I still believe about me being inferior? What am I still holding on to? What has the patriarchy taught me that I'm still holding and I need to get rid of because it's holding me back? And so we are committed to that journey. We're committed to that journey with our employees. We are, and you can't just measure diversity. You have to understand how people feel. You can't just bring people into an environment that's not safe. You have to make that environment safe. And making that environment safe is education and getting people to confront their sexism, their racism, and doing it with an educator. It's not shouting at them, it's bringing an expert in, paying experts to come in and educate your team and take them on that journey, so that when their cognitive dissonance hits, and I'm a neuroscientist, by the way, for anyone who's going to suddenly ask me why I'm talking about cognitive dissonance, because that's what it is. We don't want to believe that we're bad people, right? I can't be sexist, I can't be racist because I'm a good person. 100% that's going to hit. So we need educators that are helping them work through it. So at By Miles, we are committing to that education, but we're measuring how people feel, not just those stats. And we are intersectionally looking at that. We currently have data on how the Black women in our organization feel, and how the white women in our organization feel, and how the disabled people in our organization feel. You have to measure how people are feeling and whether it's safe. And you've got to prioritize psychological safety and education. That's the key.
Completely agree with that. And to come back to the idea of intersectionality and how people experience different things in so many different ways, I find that very often when we're having these conversations, we talk about experience, you have to justify yourself to people because they go, well, I didn't experience that. And I think you need to be fully aware of exactly the demographic or circumstance or person that you are, and it can never be directly transferred onto somebody else. So, for example, Asha, obviously you are a brown woman or identifying woman, but also non-binary, autistic, and those are the experiences that you have, and that is so different to the experience that I will have as a woman with a disability, and that's incredibly different to the experiences that Trin will have. And I don't think people are consistently aware of that. They always just take it at face value and they go, oh, but you're just you're a woman, or you're non-binary, or you're this, and they want to put you in a box and expect you to justify your experiences within that very square box that they've put you in. And so I think one of the ways that we can start to actually overcome it and start to change people's minds is by educating people about the differences between us, and about the fact that those differences mean we don't experience the world in the same way, and that you shouldn't expect everybody to try to experience it in the same way and just put up with it. So to kind of start answering a couple of questions, this is one from Inna. She said, Asha mentioned something earlier around the junior stages of her career. So how do we effectively climb the seniority ladder as women? I'd love to add in a kind of question as well on that while we answer this, of what advice would you give to your younger self when you're starting out in your career to try to make more of a change? Obviously we're all here because we're trying to make a change, but what advice would you give to your younger self? And David, I'd like to start with you. As a young man, what do you wish you'd said to yourself from now?
Starting with the guy. Okay. I think it goes back to what Asha says, which is one of the biggest questions that basically made me move from like keyboard activist to actually being an activist is confronting my own racism, not just the privilege aspect, but my own biases, and starting to put time and effort into changing it. And part of it was actually going through and working in different organizations that it was very adamant that I don't fit the culture. So I would say one of the best advices I would give my younger self is ask the question, don't shut up. Because too many times I felt uncomfortable when a colleague, black or female, or a different aspect of it, or even a man was berated or was like the entire system was against them or like diminished for some reason. I just didn't speak up. And when I actually started speaking up, and everybody was like, no, don't worry, we're working on it. And then nothing changes.
Yeah.
So the thing is, recognize when you go into that, and basically, if you're not able to make a difference, it's not the organization for you. So move on and find the right. And I think, Asha's points of this is what we're doing in By Miles, and this is the impact that she can make, is because she got to the right organization, and we can actually drive that. And we farm as well. We have 52% women, but more importantly, 60%, 70% non-white, and that means it's kind of weird to say non-white, but it's like black, brown, it's Asian, it's the entire encompassing aspect of diversity. But if you look at it from top to bottom, that stat crosses the company. So it's not like just for the sake of it, from leadership all the way down. And that is one of the things you need to look for and be aware that matters when you go into a company. So kind of a long-winded answer, but
no, it's very true. Speak up and leave if it's not the right place and it's not supporting the culture that you want. Trin, what advice would you give to your younger self and also to women starting out in their career?
Yeah, a lot probably. I think for younger self, I would just say, as a woman, it's a fact that you have to work on everything 2 times harder than a man would, and prove yourself twice harder than a man would, and you just have to be ready for that. And because the change doesn't happen that quickly, you just have to be ready to navigate that world. Ask more money, ask more equity, ask more carry, ask twice more, put zeros behind the initial ask, and really also be able to explain, because women for some reason need to explain more than men do. And definitely have a mentor, great people around you who will help you navigate through the hardest decisions you have to make, and the biggest decisions you have to make. But also going back to what David actually said, if it's not the organization where you don't feel heard, and you've tried it, and you have to try it, I wish I pushed more my voice in when I was younger, for sure. But if it's not the organization that hears you, move on. There will be other organizations. Today there are. 15 years ago, there weren't. But today we have moved forward as much that there are other organizations when you might be heard, and you should just move on.
Yeah, completely agree with that. Don't put up with that. There's no need to anymore. No. Asha, what advice would you give to your younger self and also to somebody starting out their career?
Thank you. It was great, actually. Yeah, Trin and David, you're hearing your stories there. David, by the way, if you're looking for a better term for Black, Brown, Indigenous, mixed, global majority, we make up 85% of the people on this planet. And I'm no longer
I'll take that.
I'm no longer calling myself a minority because I'm not one. So what would I tell my younger self? Oh, so many things. You're completely right. There weren't the options then that there are now. Now I would say, if you're in middle management as well and you're trying to make a difference, if your leadership don't care, you won't succeed. Stop killing yourself. And just look at it. Do they care? What's their agenda? Because I spent a lot of time killing myself for leaders that didn't care. So part of that is look at your leaders, and are they putting their money where their mouth is? Is closing the gender pay gap on their agenda, right? Are they talking about that? If they're not, move on, absolutely. But previously, I would have just said, smash the patriarchy. That's what I was saying to my God. Smash the patriarchy, babe. Get a big hammer and smash it to pieces because you're brilliant. That's what I would have said that to them. Yeah,
inspiring words. No, I think that's all brilliant advice. I also think spring in probably what I would say to my younger self. And I think sometimes it's very important for us to admit fault and to admit when kind of you've maybe held views or said the wrong thing. And I'm sure I do it all the time, or I accidentally put my foot in it and I say the wrong thing, and I never mean to, but it's very important to talk about it and to accept corrections and to accept the correct terms. But what I would say to my younger self, I don't think I was always quite such an active feminist. I think that I saw it more as a good thing that I had managed to, rise up and go into quite senior roles. And I saw that I've succeeded, I've got there. And it wasn't that I was comparing myself to other women necessarily, but I probably was subconsciously. And I allowed myself to think, I've succeeded, I've done better. And I don't think that is something that I ever should have thought. I should have thought there is a serious problem that I am one of the only people up here. But it's hard to admit that to yourself, isn't it? Because you don't want to think, I benefited from it. And, there could be lots of different ways. Maybe I had slightly more male traits, or I was a bit louder, or I was more confident. There are lots of different reasons that could have happened, but that's not a good thing. And I think I would tell my younger self that is to be aware of the fact that just because you've succeeded doesn't mean that that's a good thing. It shows that there's a real problem, that there aren't 50-50 of women and men in the position that you're in. And so I think that's one of probably the biggest things that I would tell my younger self, is sort that view out, because it's not right. And obviously now, when I then moved into actually starting a business and trying to raise money, and I think it became much more apparent to me the problem that existed, because I was no longer benefiting from the system. And I think, interestingly, that's what men need to consider as well, is just because you're benefiting from the system doesn't mean it's a good system. And so educating yourself on that, yeah. But that's not an easy thing to necessarily admit when you're standing here going, whoa, gender equality. But I think it's an important thing to do. So we have another question that I would like to say here.
I don't want to take credit for global majority. It's very important to give credit. Rosemary Campbell-Stevens is exceptional. And she coined the term global majority, and she's written books about it. So Rosemary Campbell-Stevens, check her out.
Brilliant. We have a really good question from Aaron. And he says, what can we as men do to help push things in the right direction? I'm keen to help, but I'm unsure when it's my place to speak up. What would people like to see from me or men the most? So I think this is an interesting question to put to Trin or Asha. Who would like to take that? What would you like to see from men? Maybe we'll go to Trin first about what would you like to see from men in the fundraising space?
Sure. I mean, be more conscious of your tone of voice, your even your posture when you're speaking to women, or as you shared one of your stories before, Molly, of how a man just puts the feet on the table and speaks, like, they're a big boss in the room, right? I mean, you have to create an environment for everyone to feel equal. I think this is respect to start from, and I think also to really support women. I think it's call out men who don't, but don't call them out in a way that they feel embarrassed or their ego gets hit. I think it's more about explaining to them how they can do better. And I just, by having worked in very male-dominated world before in technology, fintech, and my partners were men, I think that's the only way to call out men and to help them to understand how they can do better. And if you've reached that point already that you can, you can understand how to give voice to women and how to maybe implement certain policies, I think these are the things you can share with your colleagues, with your friends, with your, in my case, I keep on sharing that with my parents because they keep on being racist. And I keep on educating them because this is my job. So I think these are the first things in my head, but I think Asha can definitely share something else.
I love everything you're saying, Trin, and just the fact that you're educating anyone on it, right? Being the marginalized group, educating the dominant group, we're doing the work for you. That's the thing, right? So for me, I'm like, take responsibility for your learning journey. Like any ally, it doesn't matter what identity you are, Whoever you are trying to lift up, take responsibility for your learning journey. And that starts with confronting your own sexism, confronting your own genderism. We all have it. It's okay. You're not a bad person because you have it. You're not a bad person because you were born white or you were born male. You are not a bad person, but you exist in the system and we exist in the system. So take responsibility for your learning, because the thing about education is you don't have to keep asking what to do. When you've been educated, you know what to do. When you've been educated, you know how you can help. And this is, if everyone takes an individual approach to how can I end sexism? What can I do? You coach yourself, you start asking yourself these questions, and you'll find you know the answers. It's like, I could read this book and I can diversify my podcasts, and what are the perspectives I'm taking in, right? Am I listening to lots of male? Do I want more female voices in that room? So for me, it's all about taking ownership and agency of your learning journey, and that's the best way you can show up as an ally for every group, and particularly in this conversation about women.
I completely agree with that. Sorry, there's someone going past with the boombox. It's really loud.
Can I jump in with something practical, just following up on both Asha and Trin?
Yeah, please do.
The main challenge I experienced when I talk to men is like, I don't know where to start. And so one thing that I started with is there's an online test to say, are you racist? I think Stanford basically, and apparently according to that test, I am racist. And I think I just sharing the emotional impact of, holy shit, what does that mean about me as an individual? But going through that and not shying away from that discussion and recognizing is a step to basically say, okay, it's like I'm a product of the culture and where I grew up. And similar to Trin, my parents are amazing people that I love very much, but yes, they are biased and they are racist and they have gender specific biases. I'm the guy that cooks in the house, and my dad, every time we meet, he's pissed off and that comments to my wife till I actually have to step in and say, that's not a valid comment. It's like, in our house, I do the cooking. Like in your house, no, that's your choice. But those are the aspects where you need to put the time and effort to educate yourself about that. And there are tools online. Literally, it just starts by Googling, how do I learn about this? How do I learn about that? But going back to what Asha said, it's you can't shy away from recognizing that you are sexist, you are racist, and you just need to learn how to improve.
And also, you're not a bad person. You were born into a system that was always going to do this to you. You're a victim of that. So it's like, if you can separate that, then it's easier to go, and I just want to be better, right? You're not a bad person because you've been born into this, and you can change it.
And I think one thing I've recently noticed, actually, a few men have started to read Invisible Women. And I literally see them, either my friend says, oh, by the way, my husband is reading that book. Or I see someone sharing in LinkedIn, I just read this book. It's a must read for men. So I don't know, maybe if you want to recommend to friends or someone to understand where this problem really comes from, then I think this is the book they have to start from, because this is based on the data.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And if I can kind of add to that as well, I think one thing that is important for men to be aware of and not to do rather than to do is to expect women, and to your point on education, Asha, like, don't rely on people to educate you, but I think also don't rely on people to explain their experiences to you in a way that you understand.
Yes.
I think there's so much pressure that gets placed when you need to go to try to explain it until it fits in their worldview, and it's exhausting sometimes. Like, I've been asked by people, explain to me about the times when you felt that you've been treated differently to a male founder. It's like, I can explain, but you might not understand it, and it's exhausting trying to do that, because then if they don't get it, you get this feeling like they think that your experience is invalid, and it almost moves towards the idea of like gaslighting, and it makes you feel very uncomfortable, as in, have I really experienced this? Is this real? And so I think men need to be very consciously aware of, like, yes, you might have experienced people acting strangely or treating you badly, but are they treating you badly because of your gender? No. And it's having that idea of bad things can happen to everybody, but is it because of your race? Is it because of your gender? Is it because of your disability? And if it's not, then that's, you know, people being twats and not treating you nicely.
100%. But also, though, I do think there's something interesting here about prejudice versus systemic racism, sexism, right? We can all have prejudices. And I could be prejudiced against someone because they're a man, because I make assumptions about their views because they're a man, and I might treat them differently. And that's prejudice. And you experience that. And I'm sure a lot of men are going, I've been treated a certain way because I'm a man. Yes, that's prejudice. It is not part of a system. So where you might have had one or two instances of this, it doesn't have an impact on your life. And the whole point of isms is that they negatively impact the lives of people that are experiencing them, because it's every day and it's everywhere. So I think that distinction is incredibly important, because it's about impact, right? And whether this is happening at a systemic level or not.
Yep, I completely agree with that. I think that's a great distinction to make, one that I hadn't actually thought of. I think that's really good. I feel like we've really settled into this now, and like we could carry on for ages. It's like one of those where you get a feel for it, and it can be harder to feel at ease talking about it. But I think, you know, with that in mind, making sure that we continue to confront the uncomfortable, even when we don't feel right talking about it, even when you worry that you're going to say the wrong thing, or you worry you're going to do something wrong, making sure that you confront that, what makes you feel uncomfortable. Because if it makes you feel uncomfortable, then it's probably not right.
And there was something earlier around how people can call each other out. Center the safety of the marginalized group over the comfort of the dominant group, because we are raised to center the comfort of the dominant group. And so you've been conditioned to do that. Don't worry about hurting someone's ego. Their ego probably needs to be hurt for them to go on a learning journey. If someone is not safe because of sexism or racism, protect them. Like that's the focus. And like that, if we act from there, if we all acted from there more often, then we would make a difference.
Yeah, I can completely agree with that. We've run over a little bit. We still have some great questions, but I'd love for, you know, connect with us on LinkedIn. We all post about this a lot, so that we can continue the discussion and hopefully raise more awareness on this. It's been really great chatting, and thank you for everybody's engagement and listening, and hopefully being willing to chat about it and to actually make some change, rather than, as Sarah said, just discussing the same things. But we do have to discuss them, because otherwise people just aren't aware of them. Absolutely. But thank you so much. You've been absolutely brilliant guests. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.